What is the creepiest unexplained experience you ever had? Story 1. When I was younger, maybe 9 or 10, I was on the top bunk bed, looking out the window onto my street. There was a man, perhaps in his 30s, standing next to the garbage bin in front of my house. He was dressed, I would say, in an old-fashioned but well-kept manner, and he looked distinctly out of place. He wore a vertically striped suit jacket with colors and plain black suit pants. His hair was slicked back with gel, and he had shiny black shoes. He was holding a black briefcase. He was facing the road, one arm resting on the garbage bin, leaning as if he were waiting for a bus, though there were no bus stops nearby. I thought it was strange. He was leaning on a dirty bin while wearing such fine clothing. I knew it was odd because he didn't fit in with my quiet, rundown street full of kids, and it was getting late. I shut my curtain for a moment to test if what I was seeing was real. When I looked back, he was gone. At that point, my mother was coming up the hallway to go to bed. I was already supposed to be asleep. I crept to the other side of my bed, away from the window so I could peek at my mom and little sister. I heard my mom turn off the TV in the lounge and tell my sister it was time for bed. They were walking up the hallway. First, I saw my mom walking. Then my little sister held her hand close behind her, and then the same man from outside near the garbage bin appeared. He stopped at my doorway, like something out of a horror film. He turned his head and looked straight at me. I admit I was terrified. My eyes started to water, and I couldn't speak. I couldn't break the stare. My nose was buried in the pillow. My pupils were forced forward. We locked eyes. He didn't show any expression. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. He didn't say anything either, which made it even more frightening for me. I knew he had seen me. I knew he knew I had seen him. Then he broke eye contact, turned his head away, and kept walking up the hallway, following them. The next morning, I wandered into the kitchen to start a conversation with my mom. Side note, I first asked my mom if she had a man over last night, following up with questions about the man in the suit. She said no one had been over. She had no idea. I already knew that would be her answer. We never had visitors, ever. She wasn't dating or seeing anyone. My mother is a very truthful woman. There was no doubt she was telling me the truth. I then proceeded to ask her if ghosts were real. She asked me why, and I explained the story above. She told me that ghosts couldn't hurt me. If I ever saw one again and felt afraid, she said, I should just close my eyes and not look. It was the first time I had seen something in my life that I knew might not be real. To this day, I still don't know. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. A few nights ago, at 2 in the morning, someone was knocking on my door. It was a neighbor. I figured the local drug user was high and smashing people's patio furniture again, and they needed some help with her, so I opened the door. He asked me if I was religious. He said Jesus was compelling him to come talk to me right then. He mentioned that having blue eyes was really important and said it would all make sense once I heard his testimony. He offered to talk wherever and whenever I felt comfortable. I was irritated. I thought, dude, I'm going back to sleep. You can leave. I'll discuss this tomorrow. Later that day, I was about to end my shift, still in uniform because I wasn't about to talk to this crazy guy without some tools or backup. I went to find his apartment. He was inside, talking about being saved and how good it felt. He rambled on about the second coming. I stood there for a good 5 minutes listening. Then I knocked on the door and noticed he wasn't wearing pants. I told him to put pants on and come outside to talk to me. He began his speech about God. I wasn't having it. Typical end of the world Jesus is coming stuff. The unnerving part was that he kept insisting I was really important to the second coming of Jesus. He kept mentioning my eye color and my blonde hair, raving on and on about it. He also kept talking about how important women are in this time. I shut him down. I told him I was glad he was saved, but he wasn't changing my beliefs. I explained that it was incredibly inappropriate to be knocking on people's doors at 2 in the morning, especially for a single woman. I made it clear he better not be doing this to any of the other women living in the complex. He started to get anxious. He fidgeted and rambled about being persecuted. He said God would keep him safe and that if he died, he knew he was going to heaven. I stayed one step ahead of his thought process. Before he could dare me to shoot him, which he began to do, I got him to display his waistband so I could check for weapons. Then he got unclothed. Now there was a crazy naked man that I somehow had to get into cuffs. Luckily, he listened to me. He put his clothes back on and I was able to cuff him. City police showed up with medical personnel, and he was taken to the hospital for further evaluation. It turned out he had been stalking another girl in the complex for a week, blonde hair and blue-eyed, just like me. The problem was that he had a prestigious military career and had lived in the complex for 2 years without saying anything to any of his neighbors. I had only recognized him from passing by. He must have been developing these ideas from somewhere or someone for a long time. I don't know how many times he may have cycled through this in the past. One girl was already too scared to do anything, so she just pacified him for a week. I can't imagine how many other women may have done the same thing and how long this had gone unreported. Now, every night, I wonder when the cult is going to show up for me and sacrifice me to Jesus. In his ramblings, it was all very dark, sacrificial, and ominous. Story 3. When I was around 15, I was downstairs alone, working on a project. It was probably around 1 in the morning, and I had been sitting at the table for 4 or 5 hours straight, so I was stiff and uncomfortable. I decided to take a break from painting, relax on the couch for a bit, and watch the TV show I had on. After a while, I thought it might be time to call it a night. I paused the TV and looked around the room. The living room and kitchen were fully connected, so the couch I was on was only a few feet from the table I had been working at. I figured I would tidy up a bit and then head upstairs to finish the project tomorrow. As I casually scanned the room, I noticed a boy, maybe 12 or 13, standing on the far side of the table. He had messy dark hair reaching his chin, pale skin, and wore a white long-sleeve shirt. But most unsettling of all, his face was blank. No eyes, nose, or mouth, just smooth skin. I didn't immediately register him until my eyes passed over where he stood. When I finally realized, I whipped around and he was gone, frozen in terror. I stared for what felt like 5 minutes. He didn't reappear, and I had no idea what to do. Should I wake my parents? Had I lost my mind? My fear battled with teenage pride, and pride won. I decided not to wake my parents. What could I even say? Instead, I hurried upstairs. I left my project and the mess behind, mumbling that I'd deal with it in the morning. Staying downstairs any longer was absolutely out of the question. As I spoke to myself, trying to rationalize the situation, something responded. I couldn't make out what it said, but it was loud enough to be unmistakable. My heart practically leapt out of my chest. That was it. I bolted out of the kitchen and retreated to my room, flipping on every light I could find. I didn't sleep that night. I curled up with my cat, every sense on high alert, and waited for morning. When the sun finally rose, I convinced myself it was safe to face the day, and maybe even clean up my mess. First thing I did was go straight to the sliding glass back door by the table and pull up the blinds. I talked to myself again, nervously reassuring, "It's morning, it's fine, nothing's going to happen, right?" Then came the snort, right in my ear. It wasn't just a snort, it was this weird laughing kind of snort, like whatever it was found my terror downright hilarious. I immediately noped the hell out of there, consequences be damned. I mumbled apologies and explanations, insisting I just couldn't handle it. Nope, out, done. I bolted back up to my room and hid there until the rest of the household was awake and moving around. Of course, I still got in trouble for leaving the mess on the table, just as I'd predicted. And honestly, I blame that thing. Whatever it was, it clearly enjoyed messing with me. Story 4. Before I tell my story, a little context. I live in an area overrun with stray cats. Nobody really knows why there are so many, but most of them don't bother anyone, so it's not something we worry about. Some cats, though, take a particular liking to people. One of them was a neighborhood cat named Sev. He was kind of famous around here because he would always go to the 7-Eleven down the street from my house. He'd wander in, get food from the employees, and be friendly with the customers. Our neighborhood loved him, so we decided to name him Sev, after 7-Eleven. Looking back, it wasn't the cleverest name, but it stuck. Unfortunately, Sev's fame was short-lived. One day, sometime in the spring of 2015, he was crossing the street to go to the 7-Eleven as usual when he was hit by a passing car. From what I heard, the driver was distracted and didn't see him. After Sev died, a small memorial was placed right outside the 7-Eleven to honor him and the joy he brought to the neighborhood. Edit, I forgot to mention that the memorial was recently destroyed. We had some terrible snowstorms this past winter, and the wooden cross with engravings was either blown away or broken into pieces. It wasn't the sturdiest of memorials, but we were sad to see it go. Still, we knew Sev was in a better place. Here's where it gets creepy. A few months later, I was walking home after performing with my high school marching band during halftime of a home football game. It was late, probably after 9 and dark. Halfway to my house, I passed the 7-Eleven, when suddenly something furry brushed against my ankle. I jerked and glanced down, catching a glimpse of a cat out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned my head, it was gone. I was confused and a little freaked out, but I brushed it off and continued home. Later that night, I told my mom what had happened. She jokingly said it was the ghost of Sev, and I ended up joking about it too. But then I went to sleep. I must have stayed up late since it was a Friday night, when our home football games usually are. I had a traumatizing dream that night, different from usual because I had full control over my actions and was fully aware I was dreaming. I remember dreaming that I was in a house I'd never seen before, and my instinct was to explore. As I entered a long, empty hallway, I saw a ghastly little girl standing at the far end. Suddenly, she screamed and ran straight toward me. I froze in fear, unable to move. When she reached me, I jerked awake, overcome with the same stomach-dropping terror you feel when you dream of falling and suddenly hit the ground. I tried to brush it off as a bad dream and went back to sleep, but the moment I closed my eyes, I was back in the hallway. The little girl was there again, screaming and running straight at me. This time, I tried to run, but apparently my out-of-shape self carried over into the dream. She caught me easily. The same thing happened again. I woke up, closed my eyes, and found myself back in the hallway, running from the little girl, only to be caught and jerk awake once more. This cycle repeated throughout the entire night. Even stranger, when I occasionally checked the time to see how long until morning, the times were completely out of order. I would check the time and see that it was 4 a.m., go back to sleep, have the dream, wake up, and suddenly it would be 2 a.m. This happened for the next 5 nights. At the time, my anxiety was at its peak, so I didn't tell anyone. I was sure people would just make fun of me for worrying about a dream. After the 5th night, the dream suddenly stopped. I haven't had it since, but just thinking about it still scares me. I hope I never experience anything like that again. Story 5. Of Bed in Flames. A few months had passed, mid-2001. I was about 8 when we moved into the house. My parents' home was split into 2 levels. The upper half held the kitchen, a living room, 3 bedrooms, and a bathroom. The lower half had the garage, a laundry, and computer room, a bathroom, a closet space, and another living room. The entry point sat in the middle, with a pair of stairs leading both up and down. At the time, in our rather large, square-shaped downstairs living room, we had a television and a couch. The setup was positioned between the patio door and the bathroom, which you faced as soon as you came down the stairs. Behind the couch was a wide, empty space. Back then, the room was carpeted, and we kept a spare bed for guests about 10 to 12 feet away. That bed rested against a concrete wall with no outlets, and we had no lamps nearby since the light from the television area was enough to brighten the space. There was also nothing electrical above the bed. I mention all of this for a reason. I remember that day because it marked the start of a true summer. The sun had been out all day, and it was finally warm enough to go outside in just shorts and a t-shirt. My family and I spent the day enjoying the weather, then came home later in the evening and put on one of the many Jackie Chan movies we loved and still love to this day. Not long after the movie began, I suddenly smelled something burning. Without taking my eyes off the television, I called out to my mom, asking what she was burning, since I could smell it from downstairs. She didn't hear me, and my dad, too absorbed in the movie, just told me to go check on her. Reluctantly, I got up and noticed a faint orange glow in the middle of the spare bed. The moment I stepped closer to see what it was, the glow suddenly flared up, growing nearly 6 times its size into a full flame. I shouted for my dad. He turned, panicked, and rushed to grab the mop bucket from the laundry, which happened to be filled with dirty water. As he ran, the flames seemed to splatter outward, catching spots of the carpet as well. By then, my dad had come back and hurled the entire bucket of water onto the fire. The strange part about it all was that, despite how intense the flames looked, the damage was minimal. There was only faint charring on the carpet and the bed, as if someone had briefly held a lighter to them. We ended up tossing the old bed and installing tile flooring. To this day, no one knows how it happened. The sound. As far as I could tell, most of the strange things in that house seemed to happen to me, and often worse than to anyone else. Take this story for example. It was the summer of 2008. I had just finished my first year of high school. At the time, I didn't really have friends. The few people I used to spend time with in middle school had drifted away, choosing to hang out with the so-called cool kids early in the year. Because of that, I spent that summer mostly alone, always at home. My dog, a Boston Terrier named Chopper, and my musical instruments were the only things that kept me company. One morning, the only people in the house were my father and me. He decided to make some huevos rancheros and coffee. I waited happily for the food and sat down as soon as it was ready. My father and I started eating and talking when he suddenly went quiet and got serious. "Did you hear that sound last night?" he asked. "What are you talking about, Dad?" I replied. "Oh, nothing. You weren't playing with Chopper at 1 in the morning, were you?" "No. He always comes and sleeps in my bed way before then." "Oh, okay. I swore I heard his toy twice outside my door. That's what woke me up so early. Whatever, I just went back to bed." I didn't think anything of it until 2 weeks later, when reality gave me a rude awakening. Almost all my weekdays that summer were spent alone at home. My oldest sister had gone off to college, and my other sister and my parents worked during the day, so I had a lot of time to myself. One weekday began like any other. I woke up, made some food, played with Chopper for a bit, and fired up some video games. I had just recently downloaded Assassin's Creed on my PC and was playing it all day. About 3 in the afternoon, my dog woke from his nap beside me so fast it startled me. I took off my headphones to see what was up. He moved like he was stalking something, slowly climbing the stairs. I called him back, but then he began growling. The same low growl he made at exactly 2 in the morning on random nights when he stared toward the stairs. I went to check on him, making sure he was all right. When I took the first step upstairs, I reached the landing between the two floors. Chopper was there, facing the stairway up. Then I heard the noise. You know those clown noses that make a honking sound? I heard that loud 3 times, like it was amplified at the top of the stairs. Chopper whimpered and bolted away, and I ran downstairs to the patio and out into the backyard. As I slammed the door shut behind me, I heard it one more time. No one was in the house except my dog and me. I waited outside for 3 hours with Chopper until someone came home. When I told my dad what I'd heard, his face went pale. He had heard the same sound, though he thought it was my dog's toy. My sisters suggested I might have stepped on one of Chopper's toys, but there were none in the area when I heard it, and Chopper always had the squeak taken out of his toys on day 1. To this day, I can still remember that sound, clear as day. Whenever little kids from my mother's friends were left alone downstairs or in the yard, 8 times out of 10 they would ask to say thank you to the old man who played with them. If that wasn't clear, when my dog was still alive, he would sometimes wake up precisely at 2 in the morning and growl at something on the stairs for several minutes, then stop. It always freaked me out. My family still sometimes hears someone walking up the stairs at night. When we first moved in, my sister was putting something away in the closet and swore she heard people arguing just outside it. No one was in the house at the time, and there was no one arguing outside. My mom has a photo of my sister and me with my godfather that always bothered us. A distinct shadow of someone slender stands beside us. My godfather is far from thin, and it isn't a reflection off the lenses or anything explainable. Story 6. We moved in with a couple of close friends. They slept in the big bedroom. Along the hall were the study, the bathroom, and at the end the little bedroom. Downstairs was the front door. To the right of the front door stretched a very long living room, and running alongside the living room was a hall. One wall of the hall was the open banister and stairway to the upstairs. The hall ended at the kitchen, and the basement door, tucked beneath the stairs. The kitchen opened into a back sunroom that looked out on the yard, separated only by the kitchen counter. At first there was nothing unusual. Some nights if you had to go to the kitchen for water, you felt a little uneasy, but it was an old house and we did not go down for water often. About a month in, our friend and landlord asked us to make sure we closed the cupboard and put our glasses in the sink. If we came downstairs at night, he kept finding glasses on the counter in the morning. At first we couldn't say for sure it wasn't us, so we agreed to try. But even after making an effort, it kept happening. Eventually we were able to confidently say it wasn't us. If we were up early, we noticed it too. Our cat started avoiding the kitchen, not hissing like in a horror movie, just refusing to go back there. He stuck to the front of the house, okay? Downstairs also started getting cold at night. Our landlord checked for heat leaks but found none. Old houses often have poor circulation anyway, so we collectively shrugged. After not too long, the landlord couple split, and the rooms got rearranged. My partner and I moved into the big bedroom. The former study became the landlord's bedroom, and another friend moved into the little bedroom. We were all Dungeons & Dragons players and often had all weekend games together. Life was good. But downstairs started feeling creepy at night. My partner began sending me down for their water. I started making a little too much noise on purpose. As I came down the stairs and into the kitchen, it felt like I was about to walk in on someone. I remember one night in particular. My heart started racing, and I felt tense as I approached the kitchen. I moved to the left, putting as much distance as possible between me and whoever might be there, only to round the corner and find nobody. Sometimes in the morning, we would find the fridge door or one particular cupboard open. I mentioned it to our landlord friend, who was an engineer from Queens. He checked and confirmed they were perfectly flat, then added something, maybe a magnet, to keep the cupboard closed. It kept happening. Occasionally, there was still a glass left on the counter in the morning. At night, we sometimes heard someone coming up the stairs. With 4 people in the house and occasional guests, that wasn't unusual, but sometimes we would hear it 2 or 3 times in a row, with no one going down in between. A couple of times, the person in the little bedroom asked if we had been moving around at night because she heard us in the hall and bathroom, but we had not. A few times, both my partner and our roommate felt as if someone was waiting outside the bathroom. They would call out that they'd just be a minute, assuming it was me, and were surprised to learn I was either in the bedroom or downstairs. It's hard to describe, but everyone kept getting the impression that someone else was in the house. In the bathroom, there was a large mirror behind the sink, stretching about 6 feet along the wall, and from the counter to the ceiling. I never liked looking at it. I always felt like I might see someone standing behind me. But I am a scaredy cat and watch too many horror movies. I don't know if anyone else in the house had the same feeling, but I haven't experienced it anywhere else since. The person in the little bedroom mentioned that sometimes she felt like someone was testing the knob and latch on her door. She asked if it was me or my partner. We were all close enough that it didn't seem strange at first, but it got weird when we confirmed it wasn't either of us. By this point, my partner and our roommate were both students, giving them time alone in the house. Both of them left all the lights on when they were home alone. played music a lot, and avoided going downstairs. The upstairs just felt more comfortable when you were there alone. We were still hosting large Dungeons & Dragons sessions in the downstairs living room. When the house was full, 5, 7, 10, 20 or more people, it didn't feel very creepy at all. We occasionally talked about the strangeness of the house. The basement was always very cold and felt hostile. Our landlord said he just used it for storage and tried not to think about it. We all kept the doorstop in place on the basement door, keeping it closed, and agreed that was a good idea. Eventually, our landlord friend got a job in Ottawa. He kept the house and his room, visiting often on weekends. Our other roommate moved out after finishing school, leaving just us in the house most of the time. By then, we could semi-regularly hear someone walking down the hall toward our room at night, though the door never opened. The footsteps were distinct. Our cat would react, not hissing like in a horror movie, just looking toward the door as if to say, "Oh, who's that?" and then nothing would happen. My partner began feeling faint regularly, though that may have been unrelated, as blood tests later noted a B12 deficiency. Downstairs became inhospitable at night, feeling unwelcome, like an intruder had claimed the space. The basement, already creepy, felt downright foreboding. One of our friends, a rough and ready, fight and friggle punk rocker, was dared to go down there to use the toilet. He came back up immediately and headed upstairs to pee instead, saying he felt all exposed down there. One night, my partner and I were watching TV in our bedroom when I headed downstairs for snacks. We had just gone grocery shopping and some bags were still out in the kitchen. Chips for Dungeons & Dragons night, cases of pop, that sort of thing. I rounded the stairs, turned down the hall looking into the kitchen, and would swear one of the bags rustled as if someone had just rooted through it or dropped something in it. I froze for about 20 seconds, then noped back upstairs. My partner asked where the snacks were, and I pretended I had forgotten them and would get them later. On the weekends, we would mention all of this to the landlord. He tended to agree that the place was haunted and said he had his own experiences, like the doorknob to his room and study turning when he was home alone. For unrelated reasons, the decision was made for us to move on. The landlord was visiting less often due to work, and we were looking for more space. We set a mutual move-out date, and the landlord began preparing to sell the house. But one major incident still awaited us before we moved out. Story 7. I've always been a bit afraid of the dark, even now, and that summer I decided to challenge that fear. Behind my house was a forest dropping into a ravine, then another, and so on, probably a couple of 100 feet down. At the base was a bike trail. One direction led toward the city, the other toward the river valley and more woods. Several years earlier, the latter route had been closed after erosion washed large sections of the trail down the cliffs that formed the lower ravine. I packed a small bag with some water and essentials, planning a short hike, and for some odd reason felt compelled to bring along a large knife I had bought at Walmart a few years before. As the sun began to set, I set off, walking along the highway before cutting sharply to the left and down a hill, the dim bike trail coming into view at the bottom. I had walked this path often. Even after it had been closed, it ran straight as an arrow, and after several hundred yards, the river valley came into view. The vegetation now completely sealed off the gravel trail, forming a narrow, meter-wide tunnel through the rapidly darkening woods. As I continued, the path began to taper, the foliage pressing in on all sides. I remember marveling at how quickly nature reclaimed what had once been a well-manicured trail. Spotting a clearing ahead, I paused to make use of the remaining light. Crouching down, I took a few sips of water and soaked in the silence as I smoked a cigarette. The trail felt claustrophobic in its current state, and the muggy summer heat offered little comfort. I scanned the forest around me. Stillness. Silence. I carefully moved forward, making sure my footsteps were as quiet as possible. Through the dimness, a small red flash caught my eye directly down the path. I stopped abruptly and strained to see its source. Deep in the forest now, I was feeling genuinely spooked, and at this hour, there should have been no reason for anyone else to be there. Steeling myself, I took several more steps when suddenly a deer shot across the narrow trail. I instinctively reached for the knife in my bag, but the deer was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. Still uneasy about the red flash, and realizing how slow I had been to react, I now carried the knife at my side. Heart racing, I pressed on, though I wasn't sure why. Up ahead was a 7-foot-tall chain-link fence, laid perpendicularly across the trail where the first part had eroded, or at least I knew it was there. Beyond it, pitch blackness stretched out. The trail widened slightly, about a meter across. I paused near the fence, took another short break, and lit a cigarette. Stillness. Silence. Feeling as though I had triumphed over my fears, I had to decide whether to proceed or turn back. Riding that sense of accomplishment, I thought, heck, why not? The trail, once a railroad track, had steep slopes on both sides, forcing anyone who wanted to continue to climb over the fence. I tested my footholds carefully and began to climb. At the top, I swung one leg over and prepared to hop down. I glanced behind me and froze. There stood a man. My feet slammed to the ground as I faced him. The fence links between us. He lingered for a few moments, watching, or at least I thought he was. His face was indistinguishable in the darkness. Not a word was spoken. Then he stepped to the side and vanished from sight as if searching for a way around the fence. A strong sense of dread washed over me. I took a drag from my cigarette, puffed my chest out to appear calm. When he reappeared, he silently watched for several more moments before turning and slinking into the darkness. His footsteps clattered on the gravel for a few steps, then vanished entirely. Drenched in sweat, my mind raced. He had been dressed in dark clothes, long sleeves, and black pants, extremely odd for a humid summer night. At no point had I heard anyone behind me, despite the several stops I had made to check my surroundings, nor did the noisy gravel surface alert me to his presence. I'm not sure what possessed me, but I decided my best option was not to continue deeper into the woods. Vaulting back over the fence, I sprinted desperately down the trail the way I had come. But he was gone, and that scared me even more. As I reached the hill leading up to the highway, I paused under the overpass to catch my breath. The feeling of dread returned. I felt like prey, as if something was watching me. At the top of the hill, I glanced behind me, and there he was again, under the overpass. His black silhouette stood facing me, unmoving. Ice shot through my veins. I ran down the highway. As cars passed, their headlights gave me brief chances to check if he was following, but I went straight home, fearing he might still see how I arrived. I should have said something to him at the fence, but I couldn't. I have never gone down there since. Story 8. It's August, and it's hot. The house's air conditioning is never great, and at this point, I don't think it's working at all. We're just a few weeks from moving, so some things are already packed. My partner has chased me out of bed, and with no other easy choice, I'm downstairs in the back room off the kitchen, on our pull-out couch. It's hot. I'm hot. It's uncomfortable and uneasy, and it's late. I'm lying there, not asleep yet, reading if I remember correctly. I hear my partner calling from upstairs, her voice strained. I'm tired, hot, and it's late. I figure she's asking for a nighttime glass of water. I pad through the kitchen and start down the hall. She calls again, a little more urgently. As mentioned, one wall of the hall is the stairway to the upper floor. The hall runs from the foyer to the kitchen. I step out of the kitchen, just about to start down the hall, planning to call up to my partner to see what she needs. Then I look up along the banister. There's someone or something standing there. It's not a person. It's more like a person-shaped shadow, a patch of darkness in the form of a head, shoulders, torso, and arms. As I watch, it bends down around the banister looking at me. It mimics a person standing on the stairs, but it isn't a person. I see it tilt its neck to look and its hand tighten on the banister for balance, just like I would if I were standing at the top, trying to see down into the kitchen. I remember thinking in that moment, what the heck is that? And being suddenly intensely afraid. And then it's gone. There's no transition. It doesn't shift, contort, or fade. It just becomes translucent for half a second, and then it's gone. One moment it's there, distinct, and the next it isn't. Here's where it gets even stranger. I've heard my partner calling, strained, and I've seen this undeniably strange figure on the stairs. My heart is in my throat, and then, suddenly, I'm tired. My arms and legs feel like lead, completely wiped. I turn and stumble back to the pull-out couch, desperate to sleep. I collapse onto it. And my head snaps back up. What the heck was that? And is my partner safe? I clamber through the kitchen, keeping my eyes on the stairs as I sprint down the hall, then race up the stairs 2 at a time. Once upstairs, I call for my partner and skid down the hall toward our bedroom. The door is already open. She's sitting up in bed, eyes wide, clearly freaked out. "Were you calling me?" I ask. "Weren't you calling me?" she replies. "I wasn't." Something was standing on the stairs. "Did you see it?" I press. I think I saw someone like in the hallway, up by our door. "Are you sure you weren't calling me?" I was sure. She thought she saw something, not a person, more like an impression, heading down the hall moments before I arrived. I know I saw something on the stairs, but I understand if you reader don't believe me. Honestly, I'm not sure I'd believe another person either. And then, 2 weeks later, as scheduled, we moved out. The house sold to a wealthy couple so their kids could move in and attend Queens. Fond memories, quiet farewells. Postscript: years later, we're living in an apartment in Portsmouth. We have a several-month-old baby. One morning, I wake up with the baby. It's bottle time. I turn on the TV for some background noise while my brain fully wakes up. Creepy Canada is on, which is fitting. The episode is about a Queens student. Oh, it's the Kingston episode. The student talks about their house near Skeleton Park, cupboards opening, footsteps on stairs. Wait a second. The show says the biggest event was that she was in her foyer and felt like someone was watching her from the stairs. She turned and saw two people in turn-of-the-century clothes on the landing. Creepy Canada does recreations on its show. And what friggin' landing is that? What friggin' foyer? The one they show isn't the one we lived in on York Street. So that's my ghost story. I actually skipped or missed some details and events too. I believe now, but I can't blame you if you don't. Honestly, I wouldn't be convinced either if I hadn't lived through it. Edited 2. I found it. The zigzag in the banister gives it away. Story 9. When I was around 12, I lived in an apartment in London on the 8th floor of a tall building. Across from my apartment was a smaller one, and between the two apartments was a park shared by the whole neighborhood. The other sides of the park were blocked by gates, with only one entrance. Most of my free time and most of my friends were spent there. One day, my dad had to leave to handle a family matter. Seeing that all our friends were already in the park, he sent my brother and me to play, warning that we couldn't leave for the next 3 hours. When we went down, we noticed there were no parents, only kids. About an hour into playing, everyone noticed an old lady walking in. She wore black funeral-style clothes and had a sheet covering her face. She sat down in the middle of the park, legs crossed, face down. We gathered around her and asked if she was okay, if she needed help. Within seconds, the entire playground was surrounding her. A meter or two away, she began breathing heavily, then suddenly leaped up and started chasing one of my friends. Strangely, she ran past everyone else and went straight for him. She chased him into his apartment across from mine. We watched him run inside, and she followed shortly after. He later told us he barely made it in and peeked through the glass in his door to see her staring back before she finally walked away. A few seconds later, we saw her leave the building. She then walked around the outside of the park, heading toward my apartment. Everyone else at the park, besides my brother and me, lived in that other building, so it was safe for them to go home. I was too afraid. For the next hour I waited, hoping she would leave the area. But as luck would have it, I needed to use the bathroom. I asked my older brother to come with me since I was scared. He laughed and told me not to be afraid, so I went. I went into the building and waited for the elevator. When it arrived and the doors opened, she was standing in the corner. I don't remember if she was looking at me, but for some reason I stepped in. I tried to be brave, telling myself there are no such things as monsters. The doors closed and the lift began to rise. After a few floors, the lift stopped and the lights went out. Terrified, I crawled to the other corner, lay on the floor, covered my eyes and cried. When I finally uncovered them, the doors were open and she was gone. I walked to my apartment door, only to hear a noise at the fire escape outside my floor. I didn't even know we had one. Curiously, I opened it and there she was right in front of me on the other side. She instantly slammed the door shut. That's the end of the story, but a few events afterward cemented it in my mind and still haunt me today. The fire escape door had an emergency lock, which, according to building staff, had never been opened, but that night it clearly had from the other side. A few weeks later, a missing persons report surfaced for a woman in our neighborhood with mental health issues, someone we'd called a crackhead. Apparently, she had been released because doctors deemed it unnecessary to keep her confined. But the worst part came a few years later. I noticed the fire escape door was unlocked. I had long forgotten the earlier incident and went inside. I saw a dark staircase leading to another locked door, but in front of it lay boxes and a dress. The same dress the old lady had been wearing that night. Story 10. I was staying at my girlfriend's house and we were sleeping in separate bedrooms. The conservative family aspect isn't important. What matters is that we were in separate rooms. It was summer, so there was still light in the sky, streaming in around the edges of the window blinds. I put my phone on the nightstand beside the bed and went to sleep. Sometime later, I woke up, gripped by the most intense, indescribable terror I've ever felt, and I couldn't figure out why. The fear was so overwhelming I could barely breathe. The light around the window blinds was gone. I reached for my phone to check the time, but my eyes wouldn't focus. It was the strangest thing. I stared at the screen, blinking, squinting, pressing the home button, even putting it right up to my face, and still couldn't make out the time. Panic started creeping in. Maybe something was seriously wrong with me? A stroke? Did I need to go to the ER? I got out of bed and floated down the hall to my girlfriend's room, my vision still blurred. When I looked inside, her light was on. Strangely. Then I saw the bed. The blankets were pulled up over the pillows, hiding everything, but I could make out that my girlfriend was lying underneath. Something was horribly wrong. The shape under the blankets didn't look right. Parts seemed missing. Others shifted or scrambled. There was a large lump where her feet should have been, and an empty space where her stomach should have been. It looked as if she had been dismembered. The terror I felt shot through the roof. I think I tried to scream, but I don't remember making a sound. Moments later, I woke up back in my own room. I opened my eyes and found myself in my bed. I couldn't figure out how I had gotten there. I told myself it must have been a dream, but it hadn't felt like one. I'm a pretty intense dreamer and have had my fair share of extreme nightmares, yet this felt different. In some deeper sense, I knew I had been fully awake, experiencing everything I had just seen. Well, whatever. At least it was over. I picked up my phone to check the time, only to find, strangely, that my eyes wouldn't focus. I held it up, blinking and squinting, but couldn't make out the numbers. Uh-oh. Sheer terror hit me again. I got out of bed and floated down the hall. My girlfriend's light was on. I'm sure you can guess what happened next. I looked into her room and saw that same strange, uneven, mismatched, dismembered shape under the blankets. My terror skyrocketed and I screamed, only to wake up back in my bed. This repeated 3 times. Each time I felt completely awake, only to wake up again and convince myself it must have been a dream, but it kept happening. Finally, I woke up for real. I didn't feel any more or less awake than before, but my eyes could focus and, more importantly, I could see light coming in around the edges of the window blinds again. It blew my mind. It felt like I had been trapped in that strange, half-awake, half-dreaming state for hours, yet when I looked at my phone, only a few minutes had passed since I had gone to bed. Story 11. My mother once told me about a strange dream she had. She was in a mansion, and the closer she got to the cellar, the deeper her sense of dread grew. Something evil and dangerous, just out of reach. I woke up feeling so strange, I almost called you to see if you were all right, but it was 4 a.m. We laughed about her weird little psychic feelings and moved on. A few months later, I was hiking with a friend when we came across an old abandoned farm. It was cool, a little eerie in that abandoned farm way, but on a sunny day it was mostly just interesting. The farmhouse was huge and boarded up, and being curious, we broke in. Inside felt like a time capsule. It was as if the inhabitants had left suddenly in the 60s. There was an old tube of Colgate and prescription drug bottles in the bathroom, dusty and slightly rotten beds in the rooms, and magazines left on side tables. As we made our way back, the elements and wildlife had taken their toll. The floors were softer, the walls more crumbly, until I reached the large service kitchen. The floor looked actively dangerous, some boards flexing ominously underfoot. I tread very carefully. Still, I felt compelled to explore. Dishes and mice had invaded the cupboards, and an old junk drawer held a jumble of vintage odds and ends. I turned to show my friend something and realized he wasn't there. When had we split up? What room was he in? I called his name and then noticed a door ajar, stairs leading to the basement like a black mouth. I called again, my voice echoing back from that void. Cold, musty basement air blew toward me, and a creeping edge of fear settled in. I was alone, no sound of my friend, just that odd, growing anxiety staring down into the dark stairs. I turned back the way we had come, calling my friend's name, and eventually found him in a side study, looking at old books. "We should go," he said. "I'm getting creeped out." "Me too." We made a careful exit and headed back. Once back in cell phone range, I had multiple missed calls from my mom. "Are you okay?" she asked. I had one of those mom moments. I just got really worried. "Everything okay?" I told her we were fine, just coming back from a hike and that we'd found a cool old house. I started to describe it. "Oh wow," she said, then began asking very specific questions. Was there a red dining room with broken glass cabinets? A floral bedroom with a huge 4-post bed? An old white enamel cookstove in the kitchen? She was describing the house 2,500 miles away from her. "That's the mansion from that dream I told you about. A sprawling old farmhouse." "Yes." Then she started crying. "Oh geez, I'm sorry, this is so crazy. I saw that house. Oh, you can't ever go back there. I'm feeling that dread again, that cellar. There's something awful in that cellar. Please promise me you're okay." She was nearly hysterical, describing that cellar door I had seen, the stairs plunging into blackness, the rotten floor of the kitchen. I had to promise her we wouldn't explore there again, which was easy. I felt cold and tingly, deeply sad at the sound of my mom, overwhelmed by her strange premonition. I felt overwhelmed too. I'm a diehard skeptic, but she had described the abandoned house I had just been in a part of the country she had never visited. My friend was thoroughly unnerved as well. "That's what was creeping me out," he said. "I was starting to hear noises from down there." Story 12. I went camping with a boyfriend in college, almost 20 years ago. We got a little lost in the woods and came upon a large clearing. There was a big group of people there, probably 25 or 30 of all ages. Kids, parents, and older folks. The first thing that struck me as strange was that we hadn't heard them until we stepped into the clearing. The second was that they were all wearing rags, dirty, barely holding together clothes. They were playing baseball, but with an old 2x4 as a bat and a cloth ball. We approached an older man and told him we were lost. He pointed toward the woods, showing which way we should go, but instead of speaking, he laughed. The others began laughing too. My boyfriend and I thanked him and headed that way. As we stepped back into the thick woods, I told my boyfriend, "That was weird." He replied non-committally, "Yeah." About half an hour later, we emerged from the woods onto a paved road and began walking, still pretty lost. A ranger soon drove up, and we stopped him to ask for directions back to our campsite. After giving us directions, I asked him about the people in the woods. The ranger looked confused, half chuckling as if he thought I was joking. I explained that they had been playing stickball. His expression grew even more puzzled. He said he had worked there for almost 20 years and had never seen or heard of anything like that. He kept glancing between me and my boyfriend. I looked at my boyfriend, a little irritated that he hadn't spoken up about what we had seen. He was just nervously smiling and shrugging. He shook the ranger's hand, and we started walking back to camp. By then, we had been walking for hours in 90-plus-degree heat, and though we had water, I was even more irritated. After a while of walking in silence, I asked, "What just happened there?" He replied, "I don't know. I wasn't sure what you were doing." I thought he might not have understood and said, "No, I mean when I told the ranger about the people in the woods." My boyfriend looked at me for a moment trying to read if I was joking, then said, "Shell, I don't know what you're talking about. We did not see anyone in the woods. We were lost. If we had met someone, we would have asked directions." I dropped it, confused and unsure what had happened. Nope, I had not taken any drugs. 20 years later, my old boyfriend and I reconnected. After talking for a while, I asked if he remembered when we camped and got lost in the woods. He did, and mentioned a few details from that day. I then asked if he remembered the people we had met in the woods. He laughed and said I was probably mixing him up with another boyfriend on a different trip because he did not see anyone in the woods until we ran into the ranger. I still have a very detailed memory of it, but to this day, I do not know what really happened that day. Story 13. This was about 7 years ago. My husband and I had just moved into our house and had a baby. I always thought the neighbor to our right was strange. Within the first week of living there, he hung a noose from his front tree. I was still pregnant. From my back door, I could see into their back bedroom and noticed a baby changing table and other baby items. At first, I rarely saw his wife, and when I did meet her, she didn't even look pregnant. It completely freaked me out when he did his bizarre antics, like building a 7-foot-tall cross in the backyard, only for me to hear him digging it up the next day. It turned out he was bipolar with schizophrenic manic episodes or something along those lines. He was also obsessively religious, which explained why he built a giant cross, buried it, dug it up, and eventually dragged it down the road to leave on the steps of a church. I also learned that his wife had recently been on tether with an ankle bracelet for drinking and driving, shortly before she got pregnant, which explained why I rarely saw her. After I had my son, I became good friends with her and spent a lot of time with them. My husband worked nights at the time, so I was home alone with no family nearby. My son was now sleeping through the night, so my mother-in-law took him for the evening. I fell asleep on the couch around 6 or 7 in the evening and woke up to the sound of a car pulling into my driveway. I sat for a moment, and then suddenly my doorknob started jiggling, as if someone was trying to get in repeatedly. I then saw the car back out, and I swear it didn't go much further than the next door house or a few houses down. I locked myself in the bathroom and texted my neighbor, asking if she could have her husband check around the outside of my house. Instead, she sent him over. I opened the door for him and started to explain what had happened, but he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. That would have been fine, except he then told me he had been sitting outside for the past 15 minutes, no car had pulled in, and nobody had tried to get in. After that, I opened the door, and the only thought running through my mind was that I needed to get the heck out. It turns out the neighbor to my left was also a bit bipolar, and looking back seemed to have manic episodes too. I believe she also used drugs. She was loud, obnoxious, thought she was spiritually powerful or gifted, and claimed to just know things, sharing her personal life freely with a total stranger, me. But she never mentioned that she had a daughter my age who was moving back in with her boyfriend and that they also did drugs. I now assume she and her boyfriend were high and couldn't tell the difference between my house and her own until she tried to get into my house and couldn't. I still don't understand why the other neighbor said he had been outside and didn't see anyone. I think I slept with one eye open for the next couple of years, knowing I was sandwiched between two very unpredictable, mentally unstable people and their constant chaos. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.